we started in 1995 on 4th of April. Our first activity was in Sanjay Gandhi National Park, and there is a whole diversity of activities that we have done. Next. So one of our key activities and events have been the Earth Mela, which is a 2-day festival that Sprouts organizes. And we've done close to about 11 festivals. There are 9 shown here. Children and adults of all socio-economic backgrounds attend this festival. And largely the first few years it happened at Maharashtra Nature Park. 2 years it's happened at Rishi Valmiki Eco School in Goregaon. And last year we did it at National College Bandra. The numbers vary from about 100, 150 to up to about 1700 people. Next. In 2009, we started doing beach cleanups after Ganpati Visarjan. We did it for almost a period of 7-8 years. And then, of course, many people started getting involved. But we also started working towards more of solutions. So these are some of the images. Next. We also do forest cleanups and lake cleanups. We have been doing a Vader Watch program to make people aware about wetlands in India. And these are some of our Vader Watches that we've done. It used to be usually at Shivri, but now that there is a bridge construction work that is happening at Shivri, we now do it at alternative locations like Bhandu Pumping Station, etc. Next. So we run a year-long internship program, and we've had some really amazing interns who are now fairly big people in their own places. One of our former interns gave a lecture on the 22nd of April. That was Dr. Sahas Barve. He is now an associate professor at Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. Next. We also have been doing a lecture series, and like what you're going to attend one more today. These lecture series started in around 2015 at the Maharashtra Nature Park. And then for a year or so, we had some sessions at Rishi Valmiki Eco School. Then for almost a year, we had some sessions at Vikram Pawar's residence in Malad. And now you can see we've graduated and we've gone to the online platform. Next, please. So we've been also doing documentation of biodiversity in various places. We've been documenting biodiversity in the RA Milk Colony for over 20 years now. Also at the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, Tungareshwar Wildlife Sanctuary, and overall in the Northern Western Ghats. So right from Gujarat till Goa, we've been documenting in various parts and putting together information both in the mountain areas as well as on the coastal areas. Next. Some of this evidence is also being used in court cases which require documentary evidence. Like in case of the coastal road that is being constructed, one of our interns' thesis work, which I had guided, has been provided as legal evidence for court work proceedings in the coastal road case. And same is the case with the RA Mill Colony wildlife biodiversity data. It has been produced in the RA court case also. This is the marine diversity that we've documented across Bombay and in Andamans as well as Lakshadweeps, Malvan, various parts, and even at in Pirotan and Marine National Park. Next. We've been also doing some small level of research and documenting and putting scientific posters together, poster presentations at various conferences. So these are some of our posters that our interns and team members have put in. There is also a very large scientific paper that is going to come together, which has some 17 authors on the RA Mill Colony biodiversity documentation. Next. I think what really identifies Sprouts is the biodiversity work that we do, and we have a project called the Mumbai Biodiversity Project, wherein we create these picture postcard images with small information. So this is some of the biodiversity of Bombay that we have documented. Next. So we've been, as I mentioned, that for the eco-friendly Ganesha, the problems of the coastal, immersions, we started teaching to people to make eco-friendly Ganeshas so that they create their own Ganeshas with natural colors and don't pollute the lakes and rivers and oceans. So these are our camps and workshops that we've been doing for many years. Yeah, next, please. Since the last 4-5 years, we've started to organize biodiversity festivals, and the first biodiversity festival that we did was at Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve in Sikkim. The second one that we did was in Kashmir, and then the third one, of course, there's a part of the biodiversity bird festival that is organized in Dangs, which Sprouts has been associated for 4 years now. Next. Our marine walks have been going on since 2009. We did our first marine awareness activity with public on the World Oceans Day, that is 6th, 9th of June. And since then, we've been doing walks and awareness activities with people. We've always had very, very good response from public. These are some of the pictures. Next, please. We also do nature walks and treks across. So these are some of our treks and walks that we do across in the Western Ghats. Some day walks, some overnight in Sanjay Gandhi National Park, Tungareshwar. Next. Rahul, next. So these are some other biodiversity camps in various locations that we do. And we've created 2 documentary films, one on the Northern Western Ghats, which is a whiteboard animation. And second is a film on the marine diversity of Bombay. Next. We also partner with various NGOs to do awareness activities and create posters and information charts. Awaz Band was one of the campaigns or for preventing sand mining or for biodiversity documentation. Next. We've been doing kitchen gardening and urban gardening. At St. Catherine's Home, there were 2 homes which had more than 60 girls born with HIV, and we used to grow food for them in that area so that they can get fresh food for themselves. And on our office in Malad, we had a very nice terrace garden that we had created also. We also have been taking private projects for creating gardens for people in their homes as well. Next. And with Bird Count India, we've been associated with the Great Backyard Bird Count and the Campus Bird Count, and have been, for last 7 years, we've been very closely following up and doing the work and making more people aware to join and do backyard birding, standing in your own balcony, in your window, and documenting the birds that you see and uploading them to eBird so that they can be much better documentation on that. Next. We're almost ready to start. Sprouts has been doing some consulting work and creating awareness among public. The Mumbai Trans Harbour Link Road, which is coming up. So we did a status survey of that for the JICA as well as we've been consultant with various corporate organizations on biodiversity awareness. Next. Several forest department and wildlife and teachers training programs have been done across the country, in Gujarat, in Madhya Pradesh, in Rajasthan, as well as Maharashtra. Next, please. These are some of the campaigns that Sprouts has run over the years. Save Our Sahyadri, which was a cyclothon that happened, 1200-kilometer cycling rally to protect the Sahyadris. Or we've also created awareness campaigns for noise pollution against or for reducing emissions with 350.org. Next. These are some of our products over the years. Next. And some media and publicity and support partners that we have. We have many people and individuals as well as organizations who supported us, and we're very grateful for that. Next, Sachin. Rahul. So thank you for your patience and thank you for sharing this journey with us. We have a full house. I think now almost 58 people have joined in. And we have with us the fantastic and eminent photographer, Sachin Rai. Sachin, thank you so much. Sachin, can you please unmute yourself? Rahul, can you spotlight Sachin?
1 minute.
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you everyone for joining us in on this Saturday evening lecture series of the Sprouts. And this is a part of our Earth Day, 50th Earth Day celebrations. Sprouts started our Earth Mela on 22nd April 2009. That was the first day we did our first Earth Mela. And to commemorate that, we've been continuing doing these lecture series now. So today we have with us a well-awarded and renowned photographer, Sachin Rai. He's a very good friend and has been associated with Sprouts for almost over 20 years now. So thank you, Sachin, for accepting this invitation and joining us today. So welcome, and over to you now.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Hello, hello, hello. All of you all, I guess you all can see me, but you'll not be able to hear me. It's a good way to be.
So they can hear you also.
Oh, they
okay, they can't speak to you. Yeah.
That is
so
all
just
yeah.
Before Sachin starts, I have 1 or 2 quick instructions. I'm sorry. To all the audience members, the questions will be typed in the whatever questions you have for Sachin. You can type it in the at the bottom. There is a chat window. You can click on that and type it in, and we will moderate it and put them up to Sachin. Also, one request that this session will end in 30 minutes or so. So please use the same ID that you logged in, and you will join in the session again. So we'll take a 5-minute pause for all of you all to join in, and then Sachin will continue. Sachin, in front of everyone, we want to take your permission to record this session. Is that okay with you?
Please, absolutely.
Yeah, great. And this session will be then on our YouTube channel also for you to share. Great.
Sure.
So Sachin, please give us a brief introduction of your journey. How did you get into photography and how did this whole journey started?
Sure. So, hello all of you all again. Welcome. I hope you would not get bored in the next 40-45 minutes. I'll try my best. So I born and brought up in Bombay. I am from Mangalore originally. My parents moved to Bombay many years ago, but I lived in Dombivli all throughout my life. And now last 6 years, 7 years, I've been in Bangalore. Now I've moved here. I try to run my business through from Bangalore, but so be it. I started photography, I think at the same year when I met Anand, which was 20 years ago. I had picked up my first SLR camera then, and I had gone on my second tour. My first tour was with WWF. They used to do this brilliant educational camps back then. And I had gone to Paksa, Gorumara, Jaldapara, Sundarbans. That was my first ever introduction to a wildlife destination, imagine. But it was phenomenal. I had no clue about anything. But getting to learn so many things from back then the skipper, or rather the resource person, was Mr. Kedar Gore, and he was phenomenal. He was just top class. He knew his birds, and considering I didn't know jack shit, it was very easy. But everything was very fascinating. If you wanted to learn something, I didn't know the difference between a kite and a vulture. Very honestly, I didn't know nothing. And here I am in Jaldapara Strait looking at a pygmy woodpecker. I'm like, dude, how did you know it's a woodpecker? And then you knew it's pygmy woodpecker. It was phenomenal. But that is how it started. And my second trip was with Anand. Anand was the resource person. And as you all know, Anand is phenomenal in what he teaches and how he teaches. And that got me the bug of wildlife per se. So initially, it all started with wanting to enjoy birds, going into the forest, spending as much time there. But then because I also had a camera, I thought might as well make the most of it. And I started taking pictures. And then it just got on. I was for a long time an IT professional. I used to design websites for people. I used to design websites for banks, ICICI Prudential, SBI, blah, blah, you name it. All the top guys, we used to make websites for those guys. But then I used to love my job. I used to really love my job. But the calling per se was wildlife and photography. So I picked up the camera in year 2000 precisely. And for the first 7 years, I just started exploring, going to different parks, taking as many pictures, but continued with my profession. And it's only in 2007 and 2008 is when I switched my career to photography. And unfortunately, Unfortunately, India is not a great place to make a career out of wildlife photography. So I couldn't just sustain by selling my pictures. But what I could do is I could teach people photography. So after 7-8 years, in 2008, after 8 years of photography, I thought, let me start taking people out on tours with me and teach them photography. Started doing workshops. And more I started doing workshops, more people wanted to come join me on my photography tour. So it kind of was a win-win for me. And that is when I quit my job and I started this business of wanting to take people out on tours. So it helped me as well as the clients as well. So thanks to all the clients who've traveled with me and who had shown the faith in me, thanks to them, I could travel to a lot of places across the world. So I am trying to cover, I'll try to cover a couple of destinations, maybe 7-8 destinations. Unfortunately, we do not have that much time that I'll be able to show you 40 pictures each destination. I've restricted it to 5 to 8 images per destination. Of course, it is not going to do justice to any of those destinations, but I'll try my best. I would rather show you a picture and talk about it for 30-40 seconds instead of showing you 40 pictures in 40 seconds. So I want to restrict the entire presentation to around 55-60 pictures. And I will show you 10 pictures of India, then maybe 5 images of each of these destinations. So the destinations that I intend to cover are, apart from India, I was lucky enough to go to Borneo, Southeast Asia. I went to the Malaysian side of Borneo. Then I'll take you to Costa Rica. Then I'll take you to Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Madagascar, then Brazil, Pantanal. Then I'll take you all the way to the Far East Russia, the Kamchatka Peninsula. And that is where I'll end my presentation. So I'll skim you through all of these places, maybe 5-6 pictures each. And I'll tell you how and what fascinated me about those pictures and why would I want to showcase only those pictures to you, apart from, maybe 200 pictures each destination that I have. So I shall just, what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing my screen with you all. So I'll be showing the presentation. So thankfully you don't have to just see my face for 40 minutes. You'll be seeing lovely pictures. But at times in between, I may pause and I might want to show you my expression because I'll be very excited to talk about certain species. So I would do that. I would request Rahul to switch over and allow you all to see my face, and I'll talk for a couple of seconds. So you might just have to remember what the picture I'm talking about because you can't see both. Anand, by any chance, can we see split screen? Do we have?
No, I don't think this has a split screen.
Sorry guys, sorry. So I'll try not to show my face as much, but I might want to. I'm very sorry. I might be very keen about wanting to show my face as well. All right. So I shall share my screen. My name is Sachin Rai again. SACHINRAI. And I shall start the presentation. If you have any queries, please put it on the chat box. And Anand, I think, already has some questions in hand. And after the session, we'll take it up, and I'll see as much as possible. I'll try to answer all of this. Yep. Thank you so much, guys. I'll just quickly share my screen. Rahul?
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just do a full screen. Can you all see now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You can't even say yes. Okay. Very. They might be saying yes within, but okay. So guys, I start with 7 to 10 pictures from India. This is one of my favorite pictures. This picture helped me personally switch my career. This was in early 2007. Early 2007. I think early 2007, January or February 2007. This was in a place called Dandeli in Karnataka. A phenomenal place to go look for hornbills. And these are two male Malabar pied hornbills who were just flying, clapped their beaks, and they flew off. So we didn't even know why would they do that. I remember there was a girl who was doing a PhD at that time in that place called Sneha, if I remember correctly. And she said she had seen it a couple of times, but she didn't really know what was it about. And she had a theory, of course. She told us what she thinks it was. But it was very fascinating to see these hornbills do that. So we were a bunch of photographers there, and we saw them do this couple of times, but I was lucky enough to get it once. So they just fly parallelly. You don't even know that they're going to do it. They just fly parallelly, and they just turn, clap the beak, and here they are. So this picture got me an award in 2007. Sanctuary Asia was the only I would say only awards, wildlife photography award in India per se. And this fetched me an award that year. So I was quite lucky. And it did help me change my career, because these are the pictures, this and the next picture that I'm going to show. These are two pictures that they were instrumental in making me what I am, very honestly, today. So this is a picture of Ward's trogon, WARDS. It's an extremely rare trogon found in certain parts of the northeast of India. This is from my favorite place in India, in fact, anywhere in the world, a place called Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary. It's in Arunachal. And we were just lucky, me and a friend of mine, Shashank. We were just driving on a bike, and he saw this bird, and it just flew towards us. It was magical, very honestly, just to see this bird, because it's a rare bird. It used to be called as the ghost of the forest, because you can't hear them fly, because they fly very silently. The wing flap is very silent. So I kind of got lucky with the shot, I would say. But this is one.
Sachin, to let you know,
yes.
Shashank Dalvi is there in the audience, by the way.
Oh, okay. Shashank, Shashank was driving the bike, and he ensured I fell 3 times just because he showed me the bird. So just because he's there, I need to say that. But it was good fun. Can we unmute him for a minute? Actually, don't. It's okay. So yeah, so it was a good. It was a phenomenal trip. So I started as I said, my first ever trip was to Jaldapara, Gorumara, Buxa, that belt. So I was very keen on birds itself, and Eagle Nest opened a completely different window for me in terms of wanting to see the magic of that part of the country. It is just phenomenal. If you haven't been to the Northeast, guys, you have to go there. It's just absolutely insanely magical. So from there, I got lucky with one more picture. I want to show you a couple of pictures that actually changed my career per se. This was another picture that helped me win an award. This was from Bandhavgarh, Central India, a young tiger stalking a deer. I used to have a very, what is now considered a very mediocre lens, which was a 100 mm to 400 mm lens. Now it's considered a very, very mediocre, but it was phenomenal. All the pictures that I'm showing you, in fact, the last 3 pictures that I showed you were shot with that lens. And it was a great time to be. This was in 2000. 6, this picture. I'll take you to other part of Rajasthan. This is around 50-60 kilometers from Ranthambore. These are all ravines very close to Chambal, and a desert fox peeping out of a small den of its. It shows the entire habitat per se, or the landscape per se, which has been very, very rapidly destroyed because we say our government believes that these areas are absolutely futile and not worthy of land mass per se. So this is the other picture that I won an award for. Animal called desert fox.
Sachin, can you take questions in between?
I shall try. Yeah, please.
Okay. So Deepak Gurjar is asking for the word Strogan. Was it purely by chance, or did you prepare for it in any which ways?
No, it was by chance. Absolutely by chance.
So you did not know that the bird was going up and down that route?
I had no idea. I was very thrilled that I saw the bird. It was low light, and hence I had to opt for a slower shutter speed. I did not have a choice. So it was not an intentional pan shot. I would not lie. It is an absolutely, the conditions made me take that picture.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. These are 2 rat snakes combating in a lawn in Kabini. Kabini is a place in Mysore, close to in Karnataka. A lovely place for black leopard and other leopards and tiger and blah blah. But this was in the property. So what fascinated me back then, or when I started photography, was wanting to explore all kinds of animals. I was not only stuck to tigers, thankfully, at least back then. I am. But I was a big fan of everything I saw. It was a very, very fascinating time to be, because not many people had a camera, and people were very, very keen on wanting to learn. With all honesty, I remember Anand's tours being very, very informative. So it wasn't about wanting to take a picture. You get to learn everything from a small moth to a caterpillar to a snake to a frog to a tiger. So it was phenomenal. I remember I had a tiff with Anand in Bandhavgarh once. We entered the park, and for the first 40 minutes, we've not even driven 200 meters because we're just looking for birds. And I am like, okay, listen, birds are nice, but we also have to go see tigers, because the whole safari we can only see birds. But it was good fun. So yeah, so I got into something called frogs very early, thanks to a couple of people. Ashok Captain being one, Karthik from Bangalore being one, Kedar Bhide being another, Anand, multiple people. Back then, we did not have any resource material for frogs. We had one book by J.C. Daniel, BNH's book, which had probably 3 pages. All frogs looked the same. They were named the same. They were wrongly named. I'm very sorry. It was a nice book, but there was no reference point. There was nothing on frogs. So it was very, very exciting to go see, take pictures of frogs so that you can come back, ask people around who've been working on them, but there were hardly any. But now, considering what was back then, now there's so many people wanting to go explore the world of frogs. It's phenomenal. Guys, the other thing, if you've not done ever, if you've not been to Arunachal, please go to Northeast. If you've not seen frogs or not walked in the rain with an umbrella and a torch, go out and do that this monsoon. It is an absolute joy to go see frogs.
So what is the species? Sorry, Sachin.
Yes.
What was the species and what location? The earlier one, the frog?
Okay. This is, I think, Glandulosis, Raorchistis glandulosis from Coorg. This is, that's a small coffee leaf that it is sitting on, if I'm not wrong.
A bush frog, a kind of a bush frog.
Yeah, it's a bush frog. It's a tiny bush frog.
Yeah. Thanks.
No problem. These are frog eggs laid on a leaf. These are all wrinkled frogs. Wrinkled frogs lay these eggs on which the tadpoles will hatch within, and then they drop into the stream underneath. So these nests per se are usually laid right above a water source, and these are not static water sources because these are frogs that survive on small streams. So they prefer laying their eggs on a leaf above a running stream. So this has been lit up from the other side. I've used a torch to light this up so that you can see the yin yang kind of shape of the tadpoles. This is again shot, of course, in the night when we went out for a walk to look for frogs and stuff. A cicada coming out of a mold. This was shot in Anamalai Tiger Reserve in Tamil Nadu. One of the, again, a very fascinating place to go look for frogs and snakes and small stuff on macro. So macro was one of the areas that I really got into initially. And when I say initially, that was the time when I was just learning. And this aspect of photography really helped me learn a lot of things, because it's actually like the movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where you just sit in a small lawn and you just, you just turn around with your macro lens and you'll see so many things around. It's just phenomenal to use a macro lens for photography. It's a different world altogether. Apart from that, small insects, I also got into large mammals. That was my area of interest again. This is a stump-tailed macaque from Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam. Not very easy to see them, very few left in India. There are only 3 troops of these animals in that landscape, in that area, in that park at least. But it's fascinating. Ground-dwelling animals, these guys come down, uproot plants and eat the roots of the trees. They're very casual. They're not very scared. They don't attack. You maintain good distance and they walk along with you. It is a stunning experience just to sit with them, walk around while they're foraging. And these are huge troops. These troops can go up to like 50-60 animals. So they're all over the place, walking on the forest floor. So it's pretty cool. So while I was doing this, there are different landscapes that I go to. This is one of the most beautiful places in our country, Corbett, Uttarakhand. Absolutely drop dead gorgeous landscapes. This was on a winter morning. A mist rising out of the edge of the lake, elephant drinking water, early morning light. You feel blissed, in moments like this, just to be present there and to be able to see so many fascinating things in our country. So yeah, I take you to Kaziranga, land of beasts. A male tiger taking a lovely stroll amongst half a dozen rhinos who are grazing there, and the bar-headed goose in the background who are winter visitors. So it is a fascinating Northeast, guys. Northeast, yeah, you have to go to Northeast. Trust me, all the places there are magical. I bring you to Central India again, Ranthambore, a place with a lot of old ruins and stuff. And this is a pair of, just imagine, guys, this used to be a hunting palace. Imagine a king 200 years ago standing in this place, aiming at a tiger and taking a shot and killing the animal. Yeah, this was the veranda of a hunting palace. And today, these two guys are mating there. It's a mating pair of a male and a female tiger. And they're just, wooing each other. After this, they went inside on the left, there is a foliage, there's a window. They went through there and then they mated. But it is just so fascinating to see this kind of a landscape in our country. So yeah, that's it about India, I think. And I can take you to the other destination. Shall I?
So Sachin, can I quickly announce again that
Yes.
everyone, audience, we have about 3 or 4 minutes for this session to end. So please log in with the same ID, about 2.5 minutes actually. So we'll drop now in some time. Please re-log in with the same ID and we'll take a 4-5 minute.
If there are questions,
Yeah, we can.
we can take that.
So one question was that are the eggs still intact?
Yeah, absolutely. They are intact. They are intact, and so it's a transparent egg, and the tadpole is going to hatch inside. And after the tadpoles come to a slightly substantial size, it will wriggle out of the tadpole, wriggle out of the egg, and drop into the stream below. They're all alive, guys. They just can't talk like you guys. They're muted. Bad joke. Yeah. Any other question?
So out of the destinations that you've been to, Sachin, in India,
Yes.
which was difficult and which were, you've been to multiple locations multiple times. So which is the place that you would probably, like at the drop of the hat, go back and which is difficult, but yet you think is really nice to go?
Arunachal. My favorite place, as I said, Eagle Nest. It's a nightmare to go take good pictures there. It's absolutely nightmare. Because it's the foliage is very dense, the terrain is hard, you have to walk, the birds are skittish, most of the birds are small, very colorful, but they just pop in and pop out. By the time you pick your camera, it's gone. So you rather enjoy the bird instead of taking pictures.
Right.
But it is extremely difficult, but it's very fulfilling. I think just to be present in that kind of a pristine forest, it is a blessing. Very honestly, it's a blessing.
So
Blessing.
two questions,
I
two questions. One by Manoj Patil. It says, did you see the hunt? Did you see the tiger hunt? The one that the picture in Bandhavgarh?
Yeah. No. It is actually very stupid of the tiger to even attempt a hunt. Yeah, he's just sitting out there in the open. He was a young male. He was around 3.5 years old back then. His name was Chabana. He unfortunately was put in a zoo 6 months after that because he ended up killing a human being after. But no, he did not. He did not even attempt because the deer saw him and it just scooted the second it saw the tiger. But he did not manage to make a kill. He did not even attempt, honestly.
Okay, the second question was by Shashank Dalvi. If you get a chance to photograph Ward Strachan again, then will you sit on the bike with me again?
Anytime. With Shashank, it's absolute good fun. It's just that he's a he can't ride a bike.
249 have joined in.
Yeah, the other are obviously bored.
No, they'll
I need a list of who's got come back. I really need a list of who's got come back.
Right. There's Nilima Nagarkar, Vibhavari, Pooja.
No, I want to know who's got back. Don't tell me who's back.
That we won't tell you. Secrecy, the privacy of the ghost. Okay, John Anthony says I'm back first.
Oh, John, good to see you back. John is a lovely guest of mine. He's an ex Air Force guy. He travels with me a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, good to see you, John.
Lakshmikant Neve, do you write a story behind each photograph?
No, I talk. Anytime you want to do a story, call me, guys. Here I am. I'll just get water for myself, guys.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming back. We have 58 people back. So I think, Sachin, we are probably going to cross 62 now. Right?
5 are still missing.
So, Sachin, your Insta ID, please. Somebody's asking for an Instagram ID.
Sachin
Rai Photography.
Yeah, Sachin_Rai_photography.
And there you will not have a wait list like here.
No. And here is my boy. Say hi to everyone. Say hi. Shall we start?
Yes, we're 60 and counting. 61, yeah.
Okay. That one person missed something, that's okay.
No, it's joined and disconnected. So you can share your screen again. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I just did.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the first destination that I want to take you to is Borneo. Yeah. Guys, it'll be very very boring, but I'll keep saying that this is my favorite destination because all the destinations are my favorite. But but this is good. Sorry. Yeah. So Borneo is a phenomenal place. It's just absolutely gorgeous. There are multiple types of forests there, various different habitats and stuff. So I was fortunate enough to go to 2 different places. One is this place called Kinabatangan River. It's a river that flows through lovely, pristine forests. Lots of hornbills here, pygmy elephants, orangutans, proboscis monkey, teeming with life. But you can't walk. You have to do a safari on a boat. So you do a morning, evening boat ride. And this is the kind of a boat you have. And you can carry a monopod and your lens and take pictures. Animals and birds will be far, but it's good fun. It is like Northeast for me. It is because this place offers so much. It's not only about large mammals. It's about birds and small insects and frogs and snakes and whatnot. It is an absolutely thrilling place to be. So I'll show you a couple of pictures from this place, and I hope you like it. The first, one of the key species of Borneo, the proboscis monkey with a very weird nose. This is the male who has this kind of a nose, as the females will have a much smaller nose. Apparently they can smell fruiting trees from far off. These are mangrove animals. They're not forest dwelling animals, they're mangrove forest dwelling animals, always found next to the river. They can take really long leaps, but very, very unique and good looking characters, extremely good looking characters. And they're not very, what do you say, aggressive like the macaques are. They're very docile. Their alarm calls are very similar, but very, very good looking characters. This is a proboscis monkey. A white-crowned hornbill. You would have known by now that one of my favorite subjects are frogs, and here it is passing a tree frog, a canopy frog, to its mate probably, or to its adult child. I don't really know, but you can see the legs of the frog on the beak of the bird on the right. If people are watching this on the phone, I'm not really sure how big the picture looks, but that is how it is. It's a very, very unique hornbill, extremely different looking hornbill than any other. It's like how different a ground hornbill is in Africa. This is extremely other end of it. It's the white crowned hornbill. You guys should Google it to see. It's very, very crazy looking character. Then the star of Borneo, the orangutan, also called orangutan, apparently means the man of the forest. They're as big as humans, very muscular, some of them. This is a male. It was very amazing to see this huge, massive guy. This is we're seeing this from a boat, yeah? And this guy is on a fig tree, and he just sat there and picked all the ripe ones. That's all he did. He just picked exactly the ripe ones, and just by touching, he's not even actually looking down. He was just feeling those figs and picking only the ripe ones, probably saving the other ones so that they can ripe every day and he can come back to the same tree every day to eat. Very, very, very cool characters, very docile, very slow moving characters, very brilliant expressions. You guys have to see this someday in the wild. It's a very fascinating animal to see. And as I said, Borneo is all about smaller stuff. Also, this is a lanternfly, a very, very gorgeous looking lanternfly. Same place, Kinabatangan itself. A purple shade at the end of the wing, yellow spots on a green veined wing. I have no idea why would they have this creation. I have no idea why would nature want to make it like this. The nose per se, the upright nose, blue, turquoise blue. It's a very, very cool character. These are lanternflies. We get different species of lanternfly in India as well. North is one of the best places to go see lanternflies. So yeah, this is one of them from Borneo. A crested fireback. Yes.
One question. Can you repeat the name of the forest that you mentioned?
Kinabatangan River. Kinabatangan.
Kinabatangan. Okay. And Mr. Ghate is asking what are the kind of lenses that you've used on some of these, or what you have, Kit?
What I have used on my Borneo trip is a 500mm lens and a full frame camera. And I have used a macro lens and a wide angle, of course, whenever I could. I have not shown wide angle pictures here because people who view it on a phone, it will be too small. So I have not used much of wide angle pictures here, but these are the three key lenses that I carry. I now use a 400. Most of my other trips are 400. Borneo was almost 2 years ago. This is the time when I had my 500mm, so I carried the 500. Also a place where there are birds and they're going to be farther, as opposed to you going to a place where there are mammals. So hence I've used a 500 there. Of crested fireback. It's a forest species. This is a different forest in Borneo. It's a place called Borneo Rainforest Lodge. It's an absolutely pristine rainforest where you go to, and this is a place where you actually go and walk. You do not go on a boat, you actually go and walk, and you can explore so many different things there. Sorry, I am just trying to see. Anand, is it necessary that I have to tell you the place names? Because I might forget. I travel so much. I'm very sorry.
No, not a problem. Not a problem.
Okay. Thank you so much. So
Species name, yes, possibly.
Yeah, as much as I remember, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So but as I said, this is a place called Borneo Rainforest Lodge. It's a lovely property built almost 150 kilometers inside the rainforest. So Malaysia government has done a great job of protecting the entire area. Of course, they're losing a lot of their forests because of palm, but they have managed to keep some places intact. For instance, Kinabatangan River that I'm talking about, the area that I was showing you pictures of before, that place is depleting very, very fast. If you look at it from a Google map, you will see forest patches only 100 meters from the river. After that is palm. So from the river, you actually don't know how much of a damage it is. But if you look at it through the Google map, you'll realize that place is gone. So it's very, very tricky how they've, but yeah, some places they managed to keep it well, like this, where you actually get to see orangutans when you go out for walks. Also, this is a young character. This was just when we were having lunch, someone came and told us, hey, there is a orangutan outside your dining hall. And we just went out there, and this guy and his mother were just hanging around in the area. It's very cool, man. Just to see these huge guys with, nothing to worry about, protected and safe. Back to my favorite thing in the planet, frogs. This is one of the frogs that I was genuinely wanting to see for a long, long time. So usually when I travel to places, I try to do an R&D or try to find out what is it that I can see in each place. This was one of the top of my list for sure. It's called the Borneo horned frog. It's a massive frog. It's almost 5 to 6 inches big. And the call, it actually calls, to attract mate. The call is like a sambar alarm call. It's that loud. Seriously, it's like a truck. It's like super cool. So you'll not miss it. But the point is, it's always found in leaf litter, and it looks exactly like a leaf litter from top. So it's extremely difficult to go look for him. So you just have to wait for him to call every 15-20 minutes and then scan. But it's gorgeous. It's absolutely dropped as gorgeous to see this unique character bang in the middle of the night in the forest floor. Oh man, it's magical. You have to see it someday. Okay, I take you to a different location. Are we done with Borneo? I take you to a place which I have had the privilege to visit too many times. When I say too many times, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying. God will say, oh, you visited too many times. Let's put a stop to it. No, I've been to this place almost 15, 16 times now. Kenya in Africa. One of the places that I have had the privilege to take clients thrice a year. That is off season and in season. That is in season is peak season is July, August, September. Whereas this was shot in May. May is when there are rains, and you can see that's an acacia, umbrella acacia, and an African elephant standing in front of it. This is a place called Amboseli National Park in Kenya. In Kenya, that is my favorite destination. It's a beautiful place for African elephants. You can see apparently the last 50 massive tusked elephants in Africa are seen in Amboseli. So Amboseli is a place which is close or borders with Tsavo. I am assuming some of you all would have heard of a place called Tsavo. There is a book called Man Eaters of Tsavo. There was a lovely movie called Ghost in the Darkness. Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer, where Indians in the 70s, Brits, early 60s, I think, when Brits ruled us and they had taken Indian workers there to lay railway lines. Lions had killed a dozen of them, dozen Indians, and 2 Brits eventually killed those lions. So that was the story of Tsavo. And this is bordering Tsavo, a place called Amboseli National Park, one of the best places to go see the African elephants. Then the other place that is very close to my heart is a place called Nakuru in Kenya again. These are white rhinos, a calf nudging against the chin of a mother rhino. It's a backlit shot. Ironically, John was there with me. John, who just said hi a couple of minutes ago. It's an early morning shot. backlit pictures. I think Africa gives you a lot of opportunity to make silhouettes and backlit images. Silhouette is the horizon, the animal is on the horizon, and you do not see a forest cover behind, and you see only the sky as far as the eye can see. That would be a silhouette. Whereas this is a backlit shot. The sun is at an angle where the sun is hitting the animal from behind. Place to go take pictures because it's out on a platter for you. You know, you see animals every 100 meters, and all these animals are animals that you've not seen as much in skin. So you want to shoot everything that you see. So yeah, Mara is a great place for that. It also is very, very well known for the great migration, the wildebeest migration. 1.5 million wildebeest move from the Serengeti landscape to Mara and back every year. So they spend 3 to 4 months in, and the rest 8 months in Serengeti land, which is massive. So this is one of the few. This was a place where I was telling a friend of mine today morning about this instance. I would have seen at least 40 wildebeest drown in front of me. They just drowned because they didn't get onto the other side. There was a very somewhere background, and these was waiting and dropped their boat after a while. The crocodiles were not. These guys were just drowning in. It is very hard. These are these huge rock formations that happen in where they just protrude out of the ground, and you can see lion prides and cheetahs and leopards on those. So Serengeti is slightly different from Mara. Sorry, Anand.
Would you like to mention the species of animal or the Mara, the antelope?
Which antelope? I'm sorry.
In Mara, the antelope you should...
All wildebeest. I'm sorry.
No, wildebeest. Before that.
Oh, that was Thompson's gazelle. The first one was a Thompson's gazelle.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Sorry. So yeah. So this is a Maasai giraffe. Against the tree line in Serengeti. As I said, this would be a silhouette where you're taking a picture against the sky. There's nothing in the background, and this is an opportunity that you'll get to do in Africa, get to shoot in Africa a lot. A zebra, the zebras and wildebeest migrate together, and looks like a very happy zebra here, doing a tango. But these guys spend a lot of time foraging on grass in these areas. And it's just grass. Of course, there'll be multiple species of grass, I'm sure. I've heard that Ranthambore in India itself has around 120 species of grass. Imagine what Serengeti and Mara would have. It's just mind-blowing. But yes, these guys come in huge numbers to spend their time there. And down south, extreme down south of Serengeti is where wildebeest all come together and calve. So they all give birth at the same time. They all plan their birth in a span of 10 to 12 days. All of them. So even if you say 30% of 1.5 million wildebeest were pregnant, they're all delivering in those 10 to basically 2 weeks. And that is called the calving season, which is in February. I just came back from Tanzania last month, March. And you have a great time there. You see all these small, that is their way of keeping the population intact, because how much can a predator eat? Because all of them have babies. Almost everyone has a baby there. The predators may not be able to put a large dent on their population. This is something that happens in Serengeti, and this happens in February, which is what is called the calving season, because these guys have babies there. And the grasslands, of course, offers multiple types of species. This is a bat-eared fox, 3 of them. Bat-eared fox. They are diurnal. They are active during the day and night, largely nocturnal, but they are active during the day as well. Their large ears help them hear better. That was very stupid of me to say that. It's very evident, but that is what it is. The bat-eared fox guys from Serengeti. As I said, these wildebeest and zebra migrate. They migrate because of this, the rain, not because of cheetah, the rain. And the because of the rains, there is fresh grass and they just follow the rain. That is all that the wildebeest zebra do. And you can make some very unique pictures of animals in rain. These are cheetah and two cubs. This is a place called Ndutu, N-D-U-T-U. Most of the words has an N before, but the N is silent. For instance, Gorongoro, which is a crater, there is an N before. This also is a place called Ndutu, but there is an N before the word. It's a lovely place to be. Ndutu is a place where all the wildebeest and zebras come to have babies, and this is where you get to see a lot of action. Kopis, as I was talking about, rock formations, and you see a lion on that. This is where I'm sure Lion King was inspired. The kind of landscape that we see in Serengeti is absolutely different from Mara. Cool. Shall I take you to the next destination?
Yep.
Next destination is the roof of Africa, Ethiopia, the land of endemics. Most of the animals, or in fact, all the animal pictures or bird pictures that I show you here are endemic to Ethiopia. They're not found anywhere else. Now, this is a gorgeous animal called Walia ibex, W-A-L-I-A. Walia ibex is a high altitude ibex, restricted only to few areas in Ethiopia. Apparently, less than 250 animals survive in the wild. Apparently, I don't really know, but it's gorgeous. Look at the beard, man. Super cool. Very, very cool characters. As I said, endemic to the land of Ethiopia. The black-breasted lapwing, again, endemic to the highlands of Ethiopia, not even low. There are very few lowlands in Ethiopia. Most of them are just hills and mountains. This is a highland species again. You get mist and fog almost throughout the year in places like this. Difficult for photography, but it's so cool to go see these birds and animals. A blue-winged goose, again, something that is endemic to the highlands of Ethiopia. This is like driving through Somoruri in Ladakh. There are lakes, there's water bodies, and there is grasslands. But the grass is green, so you can see a lot of pikas and moles and whatnot. Nyala, mountain nyala. There are two species of nyala. One species which is easily found in South Africa. This is mountain nyala, a different species, and endemic only to the Ethiopian highlands. Very closely related to another antelope called kudu. Nyalas are very, very gorgeous. Very, very good looking guys, man. I know it's very tiring to say gorgeous, but they are gorgeous. They're so cool. Then, of course, the two main highlights of Ethiopia.
So, Sachin, just one question.
Yes.
Like of the kudu, they have a musical instrument that they make. Do they make that of the nyala
No,
also?
they do not. Not here.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
no. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. A Gilada baboon, also called as Chilada, in locals call it Chilada. I don't really know when it became Gilada, but nevertheless, these are found in huge numbers. The first troop we saw was around 250 odd animals, with say maybe 40-50 males. This is a male. They have a bare skin on the chest. It's very, very good looking character. They're massive. These are old world baboons. They're very similar to baboons. When I say old world monkeys, they evolved much before than other monkeys evolved. And these are again restricted to the highlands of Ethiopia. They're found in multiple places in Ethiopia. They're not very endangered per se. Not like Nyala. Nyala is an endangered animal. And so is this animal. This is an endangered animal. It's an Ethiopian wolf. Found again in the highlands of Ethiopia. Very, very cool character. Apparently 99% of the diet of this animal is rodent. They are not known to kill any other large predator. Very, very stray records of them killing sheep or goat. But most of the time they're killing pikas or voles or rodents and stuff like that. But they're not very shy. This is on foot. All the pictures that I've shown from Ethiopia are on foot. So you drive, then you get off the car and you walk behind the animal. You maintain distance. You walk very slowly. Eventually, they let you come close. So yeah, I had 4 guests with me, and all 5 of us would walk very slowly towards the animal, and they would all come very close, including these guys. I have close-ups of this animal also. I just wanted to show you how the place looks like as well. Now, shall I take you to the next destination?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
We go to Madagascar. I like to move it. So again, a place of endemics. It's a large island, extremely large island with great number of varied species available. Unfortunately, like any other developing countries, this place is losing habitat very, very dramatically fast. But there are some protected areas where you can go and see these animals in flesh. This is the largest lemur of the island, called Indri, I-N-D-R-I, Indri. The call is very, very similar to what the Hulok gibbon in India calls like. Shrill, have very strong vocalizations, but very, very gorgeous guys. Always live in pair. They're not troop animals. Very similar to our gibbons again. But yeah, that's what this animal is, Indri. You get to see multiple species of lemurs. This is the black and white ruffed lemur. Looks like an old man. Looks like Rafiki from Lion. No, I just thought of it. I did not know that. I'm sorry. The red ruffed lemur. Again, a species of lemur these are all day dwelling. There are nocturnal lemurs as well. I have not put pictures of those. There's a lovely lemur called I unfortunately did not put a picture of that. Very crazy looking character, but it's a nocturnal lemur. Then Madagascar also offers a lot of other opportunities. That's an emerald gecko, very similar to what we have in Andamans. Very, very similar to that. Sorry? Yeah, so, yeah. Chameleons. This place is super cool for chameleons, Madagascar Island. You get to see loads of species of chameleons. This is a very tiny, this guy is probably 2.5 inches. Yeah, 2.5 inches. It's a very small, tiny chameleon. This girl is massive. This is a girl, panther chameleon, which is probably 12 inches. Yeah, around 11 to 12 inches or more with the tail probably. Very, very gorgeous characters.
What are the names of
Then
both?
Of course, I don't remember the first guy's name. I'm sorry, I don't remember. Nasuta, I think this guy is. I'm not very sure. I'll check. Okay. This is a panther chameleon. No, this is a Parsons. Very sorry. This is a Parsons female. Parsons, Parsons. Parsons chameleon, female. Bufo viridis. I don't know the common name now. Very sorry. Bufo viridis is the name. I am assuming it's called the blue-eyed frog. I don't know. I have no idea. But a small a bush frog kind of a frog. It's a tree-dwelling frog. A very, very cool character. So this place, Madagascar, guys, is just great for reptile lovers, amphibian lovers. Birding is not all that great. There are only 200 species of birds in Madagascar from what I know, I think. But you'll not be able to see as many birds, but lemurs, frogs, geckos, and chameleons, this is the place, Madagascar. This, again, I don't know the name of the frog, I'm sorry. This was 3 months ago, November. It sticks to moss-laden branches and it just disappears. It's an absolute really crazy disguise, but very cool characters again. So shall I take you to the other destination after this picture? Sorry, I forgot there's one more picture. The only predator of this island, the Fusa.
Fusa.
Yeah, Fusa is it's a mix of mongoose, a cat, a dog, all of it put together. God got bored and had spare parts and said, okay, let me make one spare animal here. And it's a very cool character. They feed on almost every animal on the island, including Indri, apparently. On birds and bird eggs and frogs and very, very versatile characters, but very difficult to see the nocturnal guys. We got lucky early morning one day, but it's not very easy to see these guys. Fusa. Okay.
Hello. Hello. Sachin, you're on pause. Hello. I think we have some internet issue.
There might be an issue on Sir's end.
Yeah. So Rahul, how many minutes more to go on this?
9.
Okay. So just a reminder till Sachin comes back. He seems to have some internet issues. That we might have to do one more continuation session, and it'll be. Oops. Hello. Hello. Rahul, am I on? Can you put
Yes,
me
sir,
on?
you are on. You are on. I'm putting you on.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, you're on.
just check whether Sachin's coming. Yeah. So I think Sachin has some internet issues. He'll be coming back. But this session will end in about 8 minutes. So please log in again with the same ID, and we'll get Sachin back live again in a minute. I hope you all are enjoying, everybody. Any questions? Pooja, there's a question from you. I'm holding on to that. Hello. I think you
Yeah,
got
he's
logged off,
back.
I think. You're back, no? Okay. It's 662 460 152 28. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Net. Yeah. Sachin's back on again. Sachin, you're on mute.
I am on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unmute.
Guys, sorry. Costa Rica chucked me out. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was a ploy to show you my face, guys. I was bored of you guys not seeing my face. I was like, okay, let me reboot
Okay.
because
So you want to take a few? You want to take a few questions before you move on to the next destination?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay. So one question is that how do you get these pitch black backgrounds in the frog? How do you get the pitch black? Yeah.
So whoever asked, if frogs,
Deepak Gurjar.
Yeah, Deepak, hi. The frog is shot in the night, and I've used a flash or a torchlight. So it illuminates only the area where the light is going to hit. I like this. I like to see myself talk and my hands moving. Sorry, guys. It's going to illuminate only the area that the light is going to hit. So when you pop a flash, or if you hold a torch, the rest of the area automatically becomes dark because it's in the night that you're shooting and it's not illuminated through anything else. Hence, you get the black background. I hope that.
Okay. The second question is from 11-year-old Dave. He's asking, how big are orangutans?
As big as Anand is.
Not 50 years old. Okay. Size, weight. Yeah. The other question is from Rahul Malankar, who's sort of, I tell you, your look-alike, sound alike. So he's asking you, have you had any near-death experiences while photographing?
While photographing, no. While walking in the forest, maybe, but while photographing, no.
Okay.
Yeah, that we'll talk later. Shall we? I have to go to Costa Rica, guys. Very far. Can we go?
Okay, Chala, let's take off to Costa Rica. You've seen enough of your face now.
Thank you. Here we are.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. A toucan from the lowlands of Costa Rica. The lowlands of Costa Rica has a lot of birds. So does the highlands. But both these species, I forgot the name. What am I doing? The yellow-throated or something. I forgot the name. Very sorry. Keelbill toucan, and there. This is the other. This is the keelbill. I forgot, guys. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
Imagine me forgetting the name of the toucan itself. It's like saying I don't know what orangutan is called or what an elephant is called. Nevertheless. So yeah, this is from the lowlands of Costa Rica. It's a great place. This I know. It's a Chlorophornia. It's a lovely small bird. It's not very easy to see this bird. This is the female from what I remember. The male has little more blue on the head. These guys come for these this is a highland species. This is around 2,800 meters, approximately that. Talamanca hummingbird. These guys are crazy, man. These guys are crazy. I don't know how do they have these colors on the neck. So the colors that you see on the forehead and the neck is black in most of the angles. It's only in a certain angle is when you see this purple and green. In most of the angles, when you see the bird, I'm not talking about picture. When you see the bird, it looks like it has a black throat and a black forehead. But in certain angle where the light reflects in a certain way, you can see these colors. So if you Google Talamanca, you could possibly see a picture of this bird which has black forehead and black throat, but they actually are this colorful. They're very, very cool characters. So hummingbirds are one of the best things to go see in Costa Rica. This is a green hermit with a really long beak. This is with a multi-flash setup. I have used 4 flashes, 4 different flash, 2 from the front, 1 from behind, and 1 on the background. Guys, the background, what you see is not a forest, it's a cloth. You just put green cloth in the background, and you have these flowers, and you know that the bird's gonna come there looking for the nectar on these plants and keep popping pictures. Do you see this? It is a bat. Wow. It's a bat with the tongue out. This is a stage shot. When I say stage shot, this is a place where these bats anyways come for these flowers and stuff like that. But it's very difficult to know which flower it's going to come. So these guys, what they do is they pluck the flower and keep it at one place. The bats, and there are around 40-50 bats flying around on those areas. Eventually one of them will come. So you put a trigger, a flash trigger, so that every time it's an animal actually. Anytime this bat comes in front of it, the trigger will pop the flash, and you have to just take a picture. You just it will automatically pop the trigger. So it's a staged shot. It's not, because you cannot focus. You have to pre-focus on the flower and keep, and you just pop the picture as and when the flash goes on. And of course, Costa Rica is great for frogs as well. There's a poison dart frog from lowlands of Costa Rica. That is all Costa Rica that I have to show you guys. I move to the next destination.
So in
Brazil.
2 minutes, we'll have to re-log in everyone for the
guys.
last 40-minute session.
Okay. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Okay. So so last 2 destinations, I want to take you to Pantanal and then to Far East Russia. Shall we take questions for the last 2 minutes before it's easier then, so that people can log in?
So one was that when you take flash pictures, do frogs get affected?
Yes,
or
answered. Anyone
Can you
else
hear
has a question? Yeah, anyone else has a question can pop on the chat, guys. There is a chat. We have just muted you. You can type. I like this.
They have.
We mute everyone. You can't speak. We speak.
What species of macaw? Okay, we'll come to that.
Yeah.
Right. So Sachin,
yes.
So what was the earlier ones? There were a few earlier ones. Did you meet any tribe?
I had this and this and this. That's all Costa Rica had.
Yeah. No. Did you meet any tribes?
Oh, tribes. Oh, I'm very sorry. In Costa Rica, no, I did not meet any tribe. No. Shall we log in again, guys? Might as well.
Yes, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So Rahul, you can end this session. Please, everyone, log in again so that we'll start the next session.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you.
They can get lost in the background, and if they don't have colors that will shine, they will not be seen by their mates. So in areas which are very, very muted, or very either dense or snowy areas, birds do show some bits of shininess.
Yeah.
So do you shoot in manual mode or shutter priority mode, and do you always use a tripod, or do you do handheld photography as well? And do you follow the rules of third always or sometimes? These were the questions in terms of photography.
We can keep these questions after the thing. Yeah. Might have. Are all 62 in?
55.
7. Who are these guys, man? I'm trying so hard.
No, Sachin, people are
not smiling face on top. Padmaja Prabhu, hi. She's smiling. I like her.
Yeah.
Padmaja, it's very important for a speaker to see smiling faces, because half the people on top, I'll not name them, they all been like, can you finish soon? Okay, how many in? Shall we start?
56, I think we can.
Yeah, it's okay, That much casualty is okay, 6-7 casualties.
Okay, yeah.
This is like arm twisting them to come and see us, poor thing.
You put up a picture, they'll run in. Don't worry.
Let's see. Okay. Shall we wait for more or shall we just start?
I think we should start because then we'll have time for questions and interaction.
Sure. Okay. So I take you to Brazil, guys. Brazil. I had the pleasure of going to 2 different places in Brazil. One to the north and one to south. This is a place called a Macau sinkhole. This is actually a massive sinkhole. A sinkhole is basically a cave, but the top has collapsed. So the entire thing has become like a well. But it's like, the radius is like probably 400 meters. If in a crow flight, it might take say maybe 150 meters or 200 meters. The entire circumference would be much larger, of course. So it's a big pit. It's a massive well. It's a massive pit, which is called a sinkhole. And these red and green macaws breed in those areas. It's called the red and green macaw, ironically, though it has more blue, but the blue is tucked in when the macaw sits or when the macaw folds its wing. You can see the edge between the red and the blue, you'll see a hint of green. That is what is seen when the bird sits. So that is why it's called the red and green macaw. This is a place where if you are lucky and if the light has not hit the sinkhole, but the light has hit only a certain area and the birds fly in front of it, it's only the birds that are lit up and the background is not. So you just have to underexpose the shot and time it precisely so that the birds have enough light, but the background doesn't, and you get this kind of shots. So it's not a processed picture, it is shot as is. So this is Brazil. This is one of the crazy birds that I've seen in my life. It's a Agami heron. It's an absolutely cool, very, very good looking heron. It's not very common to see these guys. As a heron, it of course stays very close to riverine areas. This was shot from a boat, but it is very tricky to go see these birds. It's not very easy to see these birds at all. The curassow, lovely hairdo. You see the curl at the top of every feather. It's super cool. This is a big bird, guys. Okay, I don't know what happened. There's a black line appeared on my...
Somebody, Sachin, you'll have to go off the full screen mode and come back again. It had happened last time also. Somebody must have done it on the phone.
Yeah. No, I think it's okay. It's okay. Guys, ignore what is... that line is not there in the picture, guys. One of you... 59 people, one of you doesn't like me, he's drawn that line just to distract people. Yeah. So nevertheless, this is it's a curassow. It's a large bird. This bird is the size of a peahen. Yeah, it's a big bird, ground dwelling bird. Oh, the anteater. It's a very, very cool character. These guys feed on termites. They have this long snout. They have a longer tongue inside. They dig inside a termite mound and take out the termites and eat. They do not have great eyesight. So if you can possibly walk slowly and softly, you can approach. This is on foot. So you can approach this animal if you walk very slowly. It can hear you, but the moment it hears you, you stop and then you approach it again as and when it starts feeding. So you can cover the ground and you can get close. You can lie in front of it. It might... I don't know if this guy actually saw me in spite of me going so close. I don't, though his eyeballs pointing at me, maybe he saw, but I don't really know. His expression was like the other 50 people in the screen here. Very, very straight expression. Yeah. Now people are smiling. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah. So then the river otter. One of the cool places in Brazil that I went to was a place called Pantanal, which is a massive land area where 90% is owned by cattle ranchers, and they take these cattle out. Basically, they're also a large beef producers. Brazil. So they have these ranches where they have these cattle, and that is where pumas live. And pumas live close to these rivers because they can also feed on the caimans. Caimans are these small crocodiles. Yeah, they're different animals altogether, but I gave a reference of crocodile because it's easy for you to understand, but caimans are smaller. So these are giant river otters. It's feeding on a catfish. Massive guys, very loud guys. Even eating is very, very chompy, very, very not very civil way of eating, but that is how they are. But the hero of this place is this. So this is how you see the jaguar. The jaguar is on the bottom right at the river edge. If you see just below the rock, yeah, you see that naked patch. It's just below that is where the. Can you all see my mouse? No.
Yeah, yeah.
Anand? You can.
Yes.
Okay. So this is where the character is. This is how you see the jaguar if you're lucky. But you can, of course, use a long lens and take pictures of that where you can go closer. These guys get into the water. They're very, very cool swimmers. They spend a lot of time in the water looking for caimans and stuff like that, and also cooling themselves off. But a stockier animal than leopards, but very bold, very cool with approaching boats. All of these are shot from a boat, so it's very difficult to focus and compose because your boat is rocking throughout. And the boat is not only rocking because of the pace of the river, it's rocking because there are multiple boats there wanting to see this animal, and every boat will come and break. And when they break, there is a short wave that occurs, and that wave will rock your boat. And there's someone else who will come and stop at the same area. So it is slightly difficult to take pictures of these animals, but it is a very, very cool place to go to. Yeah, so that is all I have to offer Brazil. I shall now take you to the Far East Russia, the extreme corner of the world, one of my top 5 destinations in the world, a place called Kamchatka. Kamchatka is in Russia. You have to go to Moscow first, which from India is to the northwest. Okay, so you fly to Moscow for good 8 hours. And from Moscow, you take the longest domestic flight, which is a 9-hour flight to Kamchatka Peninsula. So you fly all across the continent and you go to the other side, closer to Japan, just about Japan. It's a peninsula. And from there, you take a chopper, and the chopper will go take you and drop you at this location. So this location where you see the 3 houses, the extreme right house, the big house, that is where you stay for 3 nights with the provisions that you take along with you. So you take a cook and you take all the food provisions. That big house that you see has 2 rooms on top, 2 bunk, so basically 2 dorms with 8 beds each. And you stay there for 3 nights. The chopper drops you and chopper goes off again. Yeah. So Russia has done a phenomenal job of protecting this area. This is a large lake called Kuril Lake, Kurile. And Kuril Lake has a lot of tributaries, small tributaries, on which salmons come from the sea to the lake and they go up again. So from the sea, they come to the lake, and from the lake, they join the smaller tributaries to go up. And that is where you see this superb brother of grizzly, which is the Kamchatka brown bears. So the same place where I shot the earlier picture. So you go, and this is a place where you just walk. So there is an armed guard walking with you throughout. Morning, evening, you go to the edge of the lake and you stay there. You take your chair, folding chair, and your tripod, and you just stay put there for 4 hours. And you have like 30 to 40 brown bears around you. You are between those bears. It is an absolutely out of the world experience just to be there and have all. So these bears, of course, they can attack humans. They're known to kill people. But at this time of the year, because there are enough salmons, they're not interested in you at all. So, of course, you can't rely on that. They could be interested. But that is why you have an armed guard. So we had this 6 foot tall, Rambo kind of a guy with a 60-year-old, but very, very smart, healthy, with a gun. He would just talk to the bear saying, no, don't approach. They're Russians. They can't speak English much, but they had few words. I don't, similarly, the bears can't speak English either. But the guy had a way to connect with the bears, and he would ask them not to approach us. This is the property. Within the property, we had this red fox. Red fox is multiple subspecies. This is one of the subspecies found in Kamchatka. This is a cool guy who would always accompany you wherever you're walking. It's like a pet walking around. So this is what you go to see in Kamchatka. All the water splatter that you see is not wave, they're all salmons. So at this point, there are thousands of salmons moving around that Kamchatka brown bear. They're all going upstream, which is in a shallow area, and they don't know how deep the water is, and that is the rocky patch where they actually lay eggs. So when they come to this size, or this time of the year is when they become red, because that's the breeding time. You can see reddish in all these water areas. You see the red here, red here, red here. These are all salmons. That entire place is full of salmons that this brown bears try to hunt like this. They just jump, and all of this on foot. You're sitting in front of the brown bear where is jumping into the water. You're just at the edge of the tributary, and you're sitting, and these guys are super fun to watch. And imagine 30-40 of them all going after salmons. It's a treat to just watch them do this. They fish for salmons, and they do a phenomenal job doing that. They are constantly feeding. And this is a mother and cub, Kamchatka brown bear, where they a super drop dead gorgeous backdrop of a volcanic mountain in the background. And for this shot, me and my clients are all lying on our belly in front of the animal. Can you believe that? They're very, very cool. It's one of the most thrilling experience I've had in the wild in the last 20 years for sure. I've been there only once. I intend to go there next year too. Yeah. So that's it, people. That is all that I had to share from the various destinations I've been to. Thank you so much. Unmute them all. Let the floodgates open. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Please ask questions if you have any.
Questions. Yeah, questions.
झालं बोली नाटक बघ अरे तू लावून तू इकडे बसली.
Please put it on silent. Please keep mute.
Yeah, questions?
Okay. What mode do you mostly shoot on? Manual or shutter priority? And
Aperture priority. Almost always, unless I'm shooting macro, then it's a manual.
Okay. And tripod, handheld, what lenses?
Almost always handheld. Only this place, tripod, and Costa Rica, when we use flash setup, that is tripod. Otherwise, almost always handheld shots. Almost.
Okay. So what are the ideal specifications for the camera? That's
Ideal specifications: aperture priority, widest aperture, increase the ISO as long as you get a 1/200 of a shutter speed and fire away. Your job is done.
that's like a doctor telling a prescription, but a little slower, maybe.
Because out of 62, I think 60 people will not be interested in knowing that answer.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions? If you don't let people mute, then they'll not be able to ask or unmute.
Okay, so let's put first Rahul. Sachin, can you stop sharing your screen and come back onto the screen? We want to see your face.
Yeah. Yes, there I am. Hello. People.
Okay. So thank you first, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
So questions. Okay, there are a lot of lens-based questions.
Yeah, I have a 400 mm 2.8 lens. Yes, that is the lens that I use mostly. I also have a macro lens, as I suggested earlier, and I also have a wide-angle lens. Yeah, but these are the three lenses that I use. Yes. Any other questions?
I had a question, Sachin.
Yes.
So when you are going for these trips, weather conditions are different. Whether Costa Rica might be so different than Russia, or how do you plan? How do you prepare your equipment and yourself and your clients basically for a trip like that?
It completely depends on the place you go to. For instance, Borneo, we know for a fact that it is going to rain. So you cannot go there and then be disappointed. Madagascar, we know it's going to rain. In fact, I time my tour in such a way that it should rain so that I get to see frogs. When I say I get to see, of course, my clients also get to see frogs. But the point is, no point going to a destination where I know, like Borneo, why would I want to go there only to shoot orangutans? Because I can shoot orangutans even when it's raining. I can.
Right.
Like all the pictures that I've shot, it's not, of course, you have to be really unlucky that all 5 days is just pouring. That's really unlucky. But there are times when it rains and then stops. So you do a fairly good job with predicting what can happen. But yes, depending on which area you're going, you just take enough precaution. For instance, Borneo, we would want everyone to carry boots. We want everyone to carry poncho, an umbrella, because if they're going to take a picture, someone will have to hold the umbrella for them. So all of that, yeah. What body do you use? No, I use a 5D Mark IV. Do you always carry a backup body? Yes, I carry a 5D Mark III. So I have two bodies, yeah. How do you guard the cameras? I hold them like this. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So no, I am assuming you mean how do I protect my camera gear from rain? Yeah. Thank you so much. In rain, nothing really. You do not take it out in rain when it's pouring, but a little bit of drizzle, your camera can handle it. Most of your cameras can manage it. Best case scenario, you carry an umbrella, get one of your friends to hold the umbrella, and you take a picture using that. Or you can always get these lens covers. You get these rain covers made for a specific lens or a camera, and they're fairly decent. But as I said, if it's pouring, then you may not be able to do a good job. But if it's a drizzle, you can absolutely manage.
Malabar hornbills that you
Oh
showed.
yeah. Oh, I'm
They
sorry, I
both
missed the Sorry. The reference must have shown in the beginning. Yes, they were both males. Yes, I'm assuming they were both males. From what I know, they were both males. There's a cheek mark. Yeah. Do you use wild roar camouflage tents, especially clicking birds? Tents? No, I've never sat inside a tent and take a picture. You mean that hide? No. I've never done that. Never. Were they fighting for territory? We don't know. I don't know what the Malabar hornbills were doing, guys. Sorry. Have you photographed anywhere in Scandinavia or the Arctic? No, I haven't, Deepak. I'm sorry. I haven't. When do you sell your first picture and how did you get into wildlife? Okay, people don't buy my picture. Okay, so if anyone thinks that people are going to make money by selling pictures, no, they do not buy pictures. But yes, magazines end up taking your pictures for publication and stuff like that. I have managed to sell some, but I can't be very proud of it. I have managed to sell probably till date maybe 20 prints. That is all till date in 20 years. And those 20 prints is only in the last 2 years, very honestly, because that is when I got into prints and wanting to sell. Name good birding destination in Northeast. I am based in Guwahati. So many destinations, man. So many. Is Shashank there? Get him to write.
Okay.
Okay. Dude, so many places. Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary is very good. Kaziranga is very good. Nameri is close to Guwahati, is one of the best destinations for birding.
Magori Bill is there.
That is a good question. How have you made your fortune selling images? John is up to his thing again. No, I haven't been able to make much money by selling pictures, John. Very sorry. What is your opinion of Nikon 200-500? It's a very good lens, guys. 200-500 is I've tested it myself. It's a fairly decent lens. If someone wants to do a nice bird watching tour in Eagle Nest, Arunachal, how many days are required? Did you stay in Tenga? Yes, you can stay in Eagle Nest. There are 2 campsites, Bompu and Lama. You can stay in Lama for 3 nights and Bompu in 3 nights. Ideally stay in the park. It's a good place. I would suggest at least 6 to 7 nights inside Eagle Nest. Okay, would you advise photography as a career to young budding? No, I'm not even finishing the sentence. No, no. So as a career, as I said, guys, if I could possibly go and take these pictures and sell my images, I would love to do that. But I am a glorified Raju guide. I have to take people out. I have to teach them photography in the wild. I'm not ashamed of saying that. That is how it is. And that allows me to go there. But for me to become that, I had to spend a lot of time, energy, money to be what I am. And then people had the faith that they would want to come and learn from me, or they would want to invest that kind of money where they would spend for me to go to that destination and teach them how to make good pictures. John being one of them. So that could be a career, but then there are already too many people getting out there. Anyone who's done one tour wants to lead the other tour. But that is how it is. I would not blame anyone for that, but I would say if wildlife photography is a career, then I don't think it's a great idea. Honestly, I don't think. You have to have a fair amount of support, financial support for you to get into it. There is a possibility, but it's very, very difficult, I would say. Yeah, sorry.
So Sachin, a few questions. Macro lens, can you suggest a good macro lens?
100 mm in Canon, 105 in Nikon, Sigma 90 mm, all of these 3 are good.
And with so many people carrying camera gears out there, is wildlife, is it not becoming intrusive to wildlife now?
It could be, but that is why people are restricting the number of tourists that enter every park. So that is not our job. Like NTC has already considered a rule saying if it's a tiger reserve, not more than 14 vehicles can enter the park. Now, if all 14 has cameras, you can't be more intrusive. 14 cars are going irrespective if it's a photographer or not. So that I don't think is. So as long as you are aware of what you're doing and you know that you are not going to go overboard trying to kill the piece of the animal or the bird or anything, you're sorted. You need to be aware that you are doing good yourself.
So Siddharth has asked, do you pre-plan your frames before going for a wildlife trip?
I cannot even pre-plan if I'm going to see that animal, guys. How would I pre-plan it? I cannot. One second, guys. I'm sorry. My battery is low. I'll have to shift my base. I hope you all can see me. A little more light in the background. So be it.
Yeah.
Halo around me. I look like God.
Yeah.
Talk to me, people.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's almost...
No, I cannot. Sorry. I want to answer that question. I cannot pre-plan my tour. Pre-plan my photograph. I cannot. I find it very, very interesting when photographers say that I had planned this shot and that is how I executed it. I find it very amusing because in wildlife, you honestly don't know what you're going to see. So even if you go to a tiger reserve, you cannot say, I want to pre-plan and have a low-key image where the tiger is going to be against a dark background. I may not see a tiger only, man. Forget about a dark background. So it doesn't really work. You have to be versatile. You need to know, if you know what all are the possibilities, when the opportunity arises, you can make that shot. But I cannot go to a park saying, okay, couple of things you can. For instance, you can go to Kenya and say, I want a silhouette, which is possible. But you can't go to Borneo and say, I want a silhouette. You have to be really lucky. Like I have got a picture of a rhino hornbill silhouette. That was because it was flying against an orange sky. Now, that was the only time I saw a rhino hornbill. Imagine if I had seen it flying against the tree canopy, I wouldn't have. So, if you know what is possible, then if the opportunity arises, you can take it. Yeah. So, a huge transformation in wildlife tours. I don't know about the transformation. There is a loss of business, we know. Yeah, so I don't really know what is going to happen, but yeah, COVID has made it very difficult for us. Yes.
So there's a very nice question by Deepak, which is asked. He's saying that carrying cameras and long lenses causes strain on the back, neck. How do you stay fit and manage your physical stress?
It is tricky. I've had vertigo issues because of the bags that I've carried. It's my camera bag is around 19 kgs. And particularly at the airport, it's very tricky if you have to lug that bag around. But yes, it can be tricky. But if you are a person who's usually outdoorsy person and you're walking around and doing stuff, if you're generally active, I think it fairly does manage to do good. Yeah.
So I think are mirrorless cameras good?
Yeah, mirrorless cameras are very, very good. They are the game changers for sure. It is going to, very soon, we are going to come to an era where DSLR is going to be obsolete for sure. I think mirrorless is the new game for sure.
So I think we have question for one or two last questions. It's for 5:45. We had taken your time till 5:30. So
Sure.
Have you ever tried?
I have tried taking pictures of star trails and stuff in Ladakh. Yes, we do tours to Ladakh. It's a landscape photography tour, but we also do star photography there, Milky Way and star trails and all of those. Those I do, yes. Yeah.
So Sachin, my question again to you is that does wildlife photography have to have a conservation focus?
No, does not. But it's good if it can.
And what's the difference? What is difference between conservation photography and general wildlife photography? Is there a difference, or do you feel?
Of course there can be. I can take a picture of a desert fox in Little Run of Kutch. That is good, great. And I'm aiming only for a portrait or a nice, lovely background picture. As opposed to the picture that I have, where if, of course, I have not contributed anything, jack shit in conservation, at least related to my photography. In other terms, I have. But if you can pass on a message, if you can show areas of problems, then it is easy. It is easy. Then you have a lot more material to talk about. Imagine I took maybe 20 seconds to talk about the desert fox picture today, right? Initially. And I told you it's a ravine and governments are flattening the ravine across the country because we want to make it farmland because they think it's a wasteland, nothing grows there. But that is the house. That is the place where hyenas and desert foxes and rusty spotted cats live. Those are the places where they live. Now, if I can tell that story, maybe there is a stronger impact to that image as opposed to me taking a picture of the same animal in Little Run of Kutch with a salt pan, but that is where the house is. It's not a, so if you can build a conservation angle, it will definitely help. But for that, Anand, I think what is extremely critical, more than that, I think what is extremely important for a photographer is to know what is there or what is he shooting, or at least have the enthusiasm to want to learn. It can't, I love tigers. Yeah, I'd be lying if I say I don't love tigers. I love tigers. I've had hated debates with Anand on that. But I love frogs. I love geckos. I love moths. I love butterflies. I love dragonflies. I would shoot anything under the sky. Anything. I'm saying that unfortunately is a very small window where people may not really appreciate other wildlife as opposed to the big five or the larger charismatic mammals. Nothing wrong with it. But I'm sure you would be a cicada molting. It's an absolutely phenomenal feeling just to sit there and see that wing come out, and the wing is folded, and by the time it expands and it turns into multicolor, it's a sight to see. A wrinkled frog protecting its eggs, it's a sight to see. A frog calling out in the middle of the night, a small bush frog this small, and the sound is loud, and to be able to spot that damn frog in the bush, these are thrilling moments. I think that can make a wholesome photographer if it can. Again, I'm no one to preach, but I'm saying I would prefer people walking down that path, that they learn a little more about wildlife and then pick up photography. Then it's a slightly easier way to.
That was my exact question that I was coming to, is that how much of time, like, do you think, because there are a lot of photographers and enthusiastic photographers here, how much of time do you spend learning about your species that you're going to be seeing, or do you do that after you come back? How is it?
Ideally it should be before, right?
Yeah.
So I have realized, because I traveled to so many places, a local may not think that this is a species that you would want to see. They may not think, right? Like an anteater is a bigger animal, but if I know, like in Pantanal in Brazil, there are burrowing owls, where burrowing owls are largely known from the US, and you know that the arid places of arid places of US, you will be able to see burrowing owls. Now, I knew that there are burrowing owls in certain areas where you get to see this. What is the long snout thing? I forgot. Anteater.
Okay, anteater. Yeah.
Yeah, anteater. So I'm saying, if you go and ask the guy is like, yeah, of course, I can show it to you. Now, if you had no idea that it is like horned frog. In Borneo, in fact, what I did is I wrote to them and I told them they have a dozen guides there working in the property. And I told them I want a guide who understands frogs. And the first thing I held him as like, dude, I want to see a horned frog. So he knows what I want. He knows what it's possible. So if he knows the area, he'll take me to like I have so many frog pictures. I have a picture of a frog called cinnamon frog from Borneo. It's a rare frog. And I had read about it, dreamt about it, wanted to see it. And I was begging the guide saying, can you please find it? Because everyone has a walkie-talkie there. Anyone sees anything, they'll be able to call you in the night also. They all go for frogging and stuff. And no one had seen. On the third night, he told me, listen, I'll take you to a place where I had seen it a year ago. I said, let's go take a chance. And that is how we ended up there. And on the same plant, can you believe it? On the same plant, we saw the cinnamon frog. So my point is, I did my homework. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, if you do a little bit of homework, then you know what is possible in what area, and you might be able to achieve slightly better results with that.
Right. And from the day of you cribbing that you have this problem, you've never been able to fly out of the country. How many hours to constantly, having bags packed, living out of your bag. How do you feel that, okay?
It's been phenomenal. It's been great. But as I said, I have to thank my clients for putting that faith in me. I myself wouldn't have been able to, thankfully, which is why I said, if you come to a stage where you think your photography supersedes others and they would want to learn from you, that is when they'll want to invest their time and energy and stuff like that. Like someone yesterday sent me a picture of a bay-backed shrike, poor thing. And he said, hey, I wanted to know what this bird is. And I said, it's a way back strike. I was like, oh, you're an encyclopedia. I said, dude, it's a way back strike. I'm not an encyclopedia over that. But I'm saying in his head, anyone who knows more than him is a guru. It's as simple as that, right? So there is no harm in saying, bus, there's so much. Like Shashank, I've learned so much from that boy who's probably 10 years younger to me. But he back then, I'm talking about what, 2006, 2005, 2006. He was a young kid. Even now he's younger than me, but he's a pain. I have
So
to.
he's asking, how did you catch your first
All
frog?
60 guys. There's a guy called Shashank. If he is, he's a pain. But
He's
yeah,
asking you a question just now. How
Is
did
it-
you catch your first
oh, how
ever
did you
frog?
catch your first ever frog? No, I have caught multiple frogs, but I missed one frog. Thanks, not thanks, but in front of Shashank and all. That was the first time I saw a wrinkled frog. I was desperate to see a wrinkled frog, and I saw one, and I said, guys, I am going to catch. No one catches it. I'm going to catch it. So back then, so guys, when we were working on frogs and all, it was all about. I have never sold a frog picture, guys. Yeah. So if I have caught a frog and taken a picture, it is only to ensure that we make good photo documentation of the frog. So when I tried to catch the frog, the damn thing disappeared, man. It just disappeared. And till date, these buggers rag me saying, "Oh, because of you, we lost the frog." But yeah, but that happened because of me. Yeah. How did you get? I was asking about Amboli frog. I have no idea which Amboli frog is about. Shang, which Amboli frog, man? Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. So I think we are about almost out of time. Also, we have 5 minutes more to go.
Okay.
So the formal thank yous. We will be putting up this video on our YouTube channel. Amruta has posted the link of that. Please follow Sachin on Sachin_Rai_photography on Instagram. And who was your first? How did you get your first client? That's a question.
Client photography.
For tour.
My tour client. I started doing workshops first. And
Right.
that is when I got, so a lot of people did my workshop and then they said, hey, we want to travel with you, and they eventually traveled with me. Yeah.
Right. And Mr. Arun Prabhu had a question that how's Bhutan for wildlife and bird photography?
I've not been to Bhutan, but Bhutan is on my wish list. It's a great place for birding, guys. It's a great place for birding. Anand will tell you more
Fantastic
about it.
places. Yeah, it's fantastic places to go. But as Sachin has mentioned, please plan your season. Please plan your, do your wish list, do your study of what you want to see or what other people have seen already over there. So you know where all you want to go. Otherwise, you'll just end up going to typical, touristy destinations and may not end up seeing your wish list species then. And of course, to have a good tour leader or group leader. So that's the second question that I had for you, Sachin, is that how much of your time and energy goes in logistics and between wildlife photography? Do you do photography as priority, or how much of your time gets spent in explaining the wildlife and how much of it goes on on photography? Do you prepare your clients before photography, train them, have sessions with them, then you take them out to field? How does it go?
So one of the things, as I had earlier said, that it is because you are responsible for those 10 people, yeah? And those 10 people have invested on their vacation based on you, yeah? And it's a big thing because it means that they are supposed to have a good time in those 10 days. They're supposed to have a phenomenal time. So you have to ensure that their food is in place, their flush works, there's water in the tap. You have to ensure all of this. You cannot say, "Boss, I'm a wildlife photographer, I'm an award-winning photographer, your flush, call the manager." No, my guest will call me. I know that. My guest will either text me or call me and say, "Sachin, my flush is not working." I have to call the manager and ensure that it is working. So there is enough logistical pressure that you have to go through. But when you're in the field, then you obviously talk about. So one good thing, that is why I said one thing that I learned from Anand was there was never a dry safari with Anand. Never. So because even if you don't see a tiger, you are seeing so many other things. You never come back disappointed saying, "Man, it was a dry safari, nothing happened." No, there is something happening every single time. So if you are interested in multiple things, your guests are always willing to listen to stories, always. But for those stories, you need to have those stories. For that, you need to have experience. For that, you need to have gone and seen enough stuff. So once you've done that, I think it's a cycle. Then people know that you'll be able to do a decent job. Yeah.
Right. So one last question from Deepak, and I think we should be closing this. It's 2 minutes to go. So what about the rule of third? Do you keep them?
Rule of third, it's good to follow, Deepak. It's very good to follow if you can, but it's not necessary that you have to follow it. At times, if you think you want to think out of the box and you want to break the rule, please feel free to do it. But it shouldn't be where people think that you don't know how to compose and you directly jumped into an out of the box situation. So make your presence felt by making regular, normal, correctly composed shots. Once they know you are a good photographer, then even when you try out of the box, they'll say, hey, this is unique, man. This is nice. They'll not say, this is an accident, Deepak. What did you do? It should be on the rule of third. So you need to have made that aura first about yourself, where people know that he knows what he's talking about, and then he's trying out stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Sachin,
Okay.
and thank you everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Next week, hopefully, we might have one more talk on around midweek or the weekend. So we'll let you know. Please follow us on that. And this was a fantastic journey. I think everybody has been going wow, and thank you, fantastic.
Thank you.
So please follow him. Go for a trip with him, and come with good pictures. Yeah. So
Thank
hope to see you
Thank
soon,
so much.
everyone.
See you all. I don't know who all are there. All of you all, thank you for joining. I can see Nilima Nagarkar. Thank you. I don't know if she's seeing also. I can't see her.
Cheers. Yeah.
I'm just scrolling up. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Pleasure. Pleasure.
Thank you. And
Yeah. Bye.
we'll see you on. You can see this video on our YouTube channel, the Green Channel, later. Thanks.
See you guys. Bye.
You, Sachin, you stay on, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
There's a leave meeting link on the right hand bottom.
For others, no.
Yes. We will get logged off, so we'll have to re-sign in on this one then.
Okay. So should we just log off and log in again?
I think, yeah. Rahul, can you end this meeting?